Our next guest is an award-winning scholar and professor at the University of Virginia. His first novel, A Burnable Book, took readers back in time to medieval England. His highly anticipated sequel continues the reimagined adventures of real-life historical figures John Gower and Geoffrey Chaucer in The Invention of Fire. A recent Washington Post review called it a thrillingly written 14th century murder mystery. We welcome Dr. Bruce Holsinger back to Virginia this morning. Welcome back and congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back.
Seems like we were just talking to you about A Burnable Book.
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
Immersing ourselves into 14th century England, and this next book takes your real life characters and moves them ahead with a very interesting thriller. Where did this whole idea for this storyline come from?
Well, when I was researching for A Burnable Book, I came across a number of records from the Tower of London talking about the armory, the Tower Armory, the arms that the king used to arm his troops for the 100 Years' War. And one of these records mentioned a store of handgunnus, which is the early English word that becomes our word handguns. And so that our word handgun comes into being in the 1380s. And I thought that was a really remarkable kind of historical fact that I then used to build this story that imagines in this novel the beginning of gun violence in the Western world. And it begins, it's a crime story that begins with a number of bodies discovered in the open privy channels in London, in the open sewers in a river. And the story is a crime story about how these men were killed, who they are, and why.
And it really does show, in a way, how handguns really changed the way people killed each other, people fought in war, it changed society in a way.
That's exactly right. And gunpowder was already a great technological revolution in this period. And the handgunnus that come into being in medieval England, they're not like our handguns. They're these very primitive, in large part shoulder-fired gunpowder weapons. But this was a period of extraordinary experiment and innovation, and that's why the title of the novel, The Invention of Fire, I imagine this is a little bit like the story of Prometheus bringing fire from the gods, giving it to humans. I think it's the same kind of implications with guns.
And once again, you bring us real-life historical figures who are your main characters. In writing the second novel, how did you really kind of get more into your main characters, Geoffrey Chaucer and John Gower? I'm sure they're becoming very familiar to you now.
They are. Well, both of them were real historical figures, as you said. Geoffrey Chaucer was a great, well-known poet that we all read in school. John Gower was his contemporary. They had a very difficult friendship, as far as I can tell. That's certainly how I imagine it. One of the ways that I get into their heads is I simply read a lot of their writing. And I try to, even though I don't want to use their ye olde English writing for my own, I try to think about their turns of phrase. For example, John Gower gave us the phrase sweet tooth. So I have a line early on in the Invention of Fire. I have a sweet tooth for vice, and it sharpens with age. So he's the first person who wrote that phrase in English, sweet tooth.
It comes into play in your chapter 1.
Exactly, exactly.
And I was interested to find out that he was the one who turned that phrase.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
And yeah, he wrote in English and Latin and French, very prolific.
And in your mind, you turned him into kind of a sleuth.
Exactly. I turned him into a blackmailer, a buyer and trader of information.
He kind of trades his skills in order to get information. I love the way in both of your books that you really do immerse us into the sense of time in that time, the smells, the way people acted, the way people spoke, the way people interacted. Yeah. It really is, for an historian, a way to teach us about the way things were.
Yeah, and I think historical fiction has that kind of teaching role. I see a lot of times when I'll read a novel set in the 19th century, I'll learn remarkable details about daily life, about political culture, about music, about art that I would never have known otherwise. So even though historical fiction isn't history, it's a plausible reimagination of history, and that's one of the things I think that's so powerful about that genre, and that's why it's so popular now with things like Wolf Hall and so on. Historical fiction is really having its moment.
Could you see your books being turned into maybe a TV show or a movie or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody wants to buy the film rights, I'm wide open. So yeah, I would love that. And I see the book very cinematically. I think one of the first things that my editor said when she read A Burnable Book, my first novel, was that it was like watching a season of The Wire set in medieval London. And that analogy has helped me think about the kind of the cinematic aspects of the stories that I want to tell.
And are you going to move ahead with these same characters in another book?
Absolutely. I hope so. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what the next one's going to look like, but I'm certainly thinking about it.
Well, Bruce Holsinger, thank you so much. The Invention of Fire, the new book, a wonderful read. And you can meet Bruce Holsinger tonight at 6:30 p.m. He'll be at the Fountain Bookstore talking about The Invention of Fire. That's at 6:30 tonight. Come on out and find out more about this wonderful read.